Hello, good day, good evening, one. Exquel, Aquana Nala, Atanaquel, Asiem Nusiaya, Entape Chantal. I'd like to call the meeting to order, and with great respect and humility, we acknowledge and honor the lands of the Snuneymuxw people. The Snuneymuxw people maintain their profound, unique, and spiritual connection to the land through ageless traditions, teachings, stewardship, and expressions of reciprocity. I want to remind everyone to use the chat if you would like to make a comment. Now we're going to go to number 2 and 3, 4, 5. Any additions, deletions, or changes of order to the agenda? Looking in the chat now. I don't see any. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda? Motion to approve by Mark, seconded by Craig. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, the agenda is approved. And now we'll be going to number 6, approval of the minutes, that the minutes from the Education Committee meeting held on December 6, 2023 be approved. Could I get a motion to approve the minutes from December 6, 2023? That would be Mark Robinson, moves to approve, seconded by Tanya. Anyone opposed? Okay, seeing none opposed, we will move on with the agenda as presented. Number 7, is there any presentations this evening? It does not look like there's any presentations. We are going on to number 8, senior staff reports. And the first one will be by the Department of Learning Services. I believe Kristen Funky Robinson will be doing the presentation, but I'm not quite sure. I see Laura and Kristen on screen. So wonderful if both of you are presenting. This is about the Integrated Child and Youth Teams update. Thank you very much, and take it away.
Thank you, Chair. Good to see all of you. So we're happy to share with you this evening some information on BC's Integrated Child and Youth Teams. It's a big mandate. It's a ministry mandated initiative, and it's part of a larger sort of provincial strategy around mental health and substance use care. The initiative is intended to bring together a multitude or a variety of services to make access much easier for children and youth, and of course their families. One of the really unique things about the initiative is that it is a multi-ministerial initiative, which I think has so much beautiful potential. So we're looking at integrating services from 4 different ministries. So of course, education, health, mental health and addictions, and of course, child and family development. All united under one umbrella and under this one mandate. The ICY, Integrated Child and Youth, ICY, will in our school district here will service the same geographical area as our school district does. So we're looking at right from Lanceville to Ladysmith, this sort of geographical area. It will be serving children and youth from 0 to 19, whether they are students or not. So the geographic region is the same, but we will be adding this other bonus of sort of 0 to 19, not just K to 12. So right from the start, right from when the ministry announced that Nanaimo Ladysmith would be receiving actually 4 of these teams, the superintendent expressed his support immediately, and we've really taken that expression of support and we've sort of run with it. So I've been working really closely with Director of Instruction, Kirsten Funky Robinson, and our Assistant Director of Complex Mental Health, Lynn Brown. And the 3 of us have been working. I'm a supporting role for the 2 beautiful people, Lynn and Kirsten, that they are really, really leading this work. And we've really taken the opportunity to leverage this beautiful services, this opportunity, And rather than just sort of receiving it as a mandate and letting it play out, we really have and are looking at a multitude of ways of how we can integrate this seamlessly into our existing structures to really make this opportunity special and to optimize the mandate really that we've been given to even better serve our children and youth. So it is something that we are embracing, receiving with open arms, and we are trying to make it very special and as good as it can be. I think, across the province, it's brand new, and I feel really lucky that we've been able to do that we've sort of been given the opportunity to look at it and invite it and weave it into our system. So with that, I am going to pass it over to Kirsten, and she's going to give us a little bit more of a detailed look at the program so far and how it's playing out here in our district.
Thank you, Laura. I'm just going to take a minute to share my screen here. Right, so thank you very much. Yes, I definitely would like to emphasize the same enthusiasm that Laura shared about these integrated child and youth teams. This is a very unique opportunity for Nanaimo Ladysmith. We are part of the second wave of implementation of these teams in the province. So the first wave was 5 districts. We're part of the second wave of 7 districts, and we have the largest allocation along with Richmond School District thus far in terms of the resources coming to our area for mental health supports for students and their families. So it's very, very exciting. So just to give you a little bit of an overview, for ICY is the acronym that we're using. Some people are using the term ICY, but all referring to Integrated Child and Youth Teams. So the model of a service delivery for ICY is certainly an outbound, outreach-based service model. And the intention is that these mental health services are very much wraparound supports. So they're meeting students and families where they're at. It certainly moves beyond simply a traditional clinical counseling service, although that is part of it, to be able to really comprehensively meet students and their families' needs in all ways that support wellness overall. Certainly another piece of this is bringing peer supports to students and to their families. So we're looking for individuals with lived experience, perhaps with mental health challenges, or lived experience with some of the other complexities that sometimes impact individuals as they're working on mental health and wellness. And so these are also some of the supports that are available as part of the ICY teams. So as I mentioned, the model is flexible and outbound. So we're talking about clinical counseling that could be in an office setting, but we're also talking about peer support workers or Indigenous cultural support workers or family support workers that may be able to meet children and their families in the community, at a park, in nature, in settings that are most comfortable for the children and their families. And then the other unique aspect of ICY teams is that they are multidisciplinary. And so as Laura mentioned, this is super unique in that 4 ministries are working together to provide staff that participate together in these teams and that share information in a way that has often historically been quite difficult across ministries. The ICY teams are a part of the province's Pathway to Hope, which you'll be familiar with, the Ministry of Mental Health and Addictions, which was created in 2017, I believe. And then the creation of the Pathway to Hope, which was the province's commitments to improvements in mental health services overall. And you can see from the visual there that there are 4 sort of main areas, and the establishment of the ICY teams is just one component of working towards improving the wellness of children and youth. Now, in terms of the ICY team startup and development, it's quite structured and unique in that the 4 ministries are working together to create a model that serves local needs. So there are a lot of parameters in terms of the structures, and this comes from the Provincial Support Office through the Ministry of Mental Health and Addictions, and they develop the policies, the processes, some of the systems and structures that are to be used by ICY teams. But then there are also local program developers members, who are individuals situated here within our community, but who work for the Ministry of Mental Health and Addictions, and then who bring together some of the local partners. So this is where the local employers table fits in, and this is also where NLPS fits into the model. So we sit on the local employers table as one organization, along with, oh, my slides advanced, sorry about that. Along with staff from the Ministry of Children and Family Development and the Island Health staff as well. So in addition, as part of the model, there are ICY team program leaders. And so we have actually just had this individual start. She's been on the job for about a week and a half now. She's actually an Island Health staff member, but moving forward, her role will be to lead that team and to really oversee additional hiring, training, and develop local processes around receiving referrals and so on. So it's very exciting to have someone in place in that role. This slide just gives you a little bit of a timeline about the ICY implementation here in NLPS. So we began in the spring of 2023 with a community engagement process. We came together at Bevan Park with representation from all 4 ministries, as well as a number of other organizations locally that provide services to children and youth, and our 5 Indigenous partner organizations as well. And so this was a chance for us all to hear a little bit about the provincial ICY model, and also to give our input about some of our local needs. We then moved from that, and last fall we began as local employers to sit at a table and begin to plan some of our local processes. And we've moved further from there into where we sit now, which is winter 2024. And we have just begun to launch our ICY teams. So as I mentioned, we have a program leader in place now who's an Island Health staff member. And we also, as of 3 days ago, as of Monday, have 4 clinical counselors who have just also begun as part of the ICY teams. And so probably the most important piece when we look at ongoing service delivery beyond our current state is we foresee that this will go on, and we will continue to add ICY team members, whether they be staff members of the school district in the case of peer support workers that I'll talk about in a minute, or additional team members who will be hired by Island Health, and also will be joining us from places like Child and Youth Mental Health or the Ministry for Children and Family Development, as well as other Island Health services. So it's really, really an exciting opportunity. We're talking about 4 teams of 7 people each. So 28 team members, some of whom are new resources, some of whom are part of organizations like Child and Youth Mental Health already, but all of those members will be coming together to implement ICY in the long run. So currently here in NLPS, we are located at Dufferin Crescent. And so although the model is flexible and outbound, there are office spaces there that are that include some spaces where children and families can have direct access to the ICY team members. The actual types of services are highly individualized and tailored to the needs of students and their families. So this can include, as I mentioned before, traditional clinical counseling, but it can also include a wide range of other services. It can simply be coming in for brief check-ins and touch points. It's something that will truly evolve as the teams get up and running. To access ICY, the referral pathway is currently being developed by that local employer table. And now that we have a program lead in place, she will be very instrumental in developing that referral pathway. Here in NLPS, referrals for our students can come through the Learning Services Support Team, which includes myself as well as Lynn Brown, as Laura mentioned earlier. And so individuals like school counselors certainly would be very instrumental in creating those referrals. In terms of wait lists, as you know, this is a chronic barrier sometimes with services for children and their families. So the ICY model is intended to significantly reduce wait times in that it's an additional supports are available, but also so that even if there's a wait for clinical counseling support, children and families can, in the meantime, have access to all sorts of other supports, including peer support workers, family support, perhaps participation in groups, and so on, so that they become attached to those teams and maybe can even be connected with other services within Island Health or Child and Youth Mental Health while they're waiting for clinical counseling, perhaps from an ICY counselor. And then, as Laura also mentioned earlier, one of the interesting stipulations about ICY, and this is something that I have to be careful, as I mentioned to Laura, I always refer to children and youth as students because that's my frame of reference. But with the ICY teams, they're actually designed to serve all children and youth from ages 0 to 19. So we're not necessarily talking about students of NLPS. These are children and youth 0 to 19 who live within the geographic boundaries of our school district. So that's kind of an interesting piece. And part of the idea there is that if children and youth move between different areas provincially and they're already attached to ICY team services, that they can seamlessly integrate into new ICY teams as they move. That's part of the intention of the model. So locally, right now, this gives you a little bit of a breakdown of the different roles that are included in an ICY team. And you'll notice when you look at the employer in the column on the right, it's very interesting because some of these individuals are not, in fact, employees of the school district. The ones that are highlighted there, the clinical counselors and the youth peer support workers, are school district employees. So as I mentioned, we've just hired 4 clinical counselors who started on Monday. This is a super dynamic and super skilled group of individuals with a very diverse skill set and experiences and backgrounds to really cover the range of services that children and youth may need from 0 to 19. And then the youth peer support workers are going to be hired, we're hoping later this month, but certainly those postings will go out within the month of January. And those will be 4 QP positions. And youth peer support workers are positions, as are clinical counselors, that we've never had within the school system before. So youth peer support workers are different from, let's say, a child, youth and family support worker, in that they aren't coming to us necessarily with a degree in child and youth care or any kind of formal training, but the key criteria is that they have lived experience. So they may be individuals with lived experiences navigating supports for their own mental health, or as family members of a loved one who's had to navigate mental health challenges. There are a whole range of different examples of lived experiences that we would look at for individuals in peer support worker roles. And then I think I didn't speak to it too much, but I would just take a moment to distinguish the role of the ICY clinical counselors as well from, let's say, our school counselors that we have in place now. So as you know, our school counselors are teachers, certified teachers who maintain large caseloads in that they do case management for individuals with individual education plans. They, in secondary schools, do help with things like course selection and timetabling. They have a wide range of responsibilities, and they don't provide direct ongoing therapeutic counseling support. So that's very different than the ICY clinical counselors, who are 12-month employees. They're excluded staff. They're all responsible for supervising a youth peer support worker. So they'll work in dyads, and the clinical counselor and peer support worker then may be attached to the same students in many instances. And so their primary responsibility as clinical counselors then is to engage in those ongoing one-on-one therapeutic relationships with children and youth. So it's a little bit unique in that sense. And this is a resource that we've historically had lots of challenge getting students connected to, because there's never enough of that resource. So this is a real benefit to our kids and families. And that pretty much covers a bit of an overview of the ICY teams. I would love to invite all of you to join us. We're hoping to host an open house at the location at Dufferin Crescent as soon as the teams are up and fully operational, and we're still setting up some desks and things like that at this point in time. But please stay tuned, because we will be putting out word about an open house soon.
Alrighty,
Thank you.
so much, Kirsten. That's excellent. You know, there's the old adage of the sort of building the plane as you're flying it, and that's exactly what we have been doing, and we will continue to do probably for the remainder of this school year as we learn more and as more members are joining the larger ICY teams. And so we're open and available now for questions or comments from the trustees.
Great, thank you. I see that Naomi as the first on the list.
Hi, thank you. I have a couple of questions. I'll start with my first one is around the mentioning of that this was last year. There were 5 school districts that were given the opportunity to start this, and I was wondering if we have been able to talk with the other school districts to find out what worked and what didn't work and what were the complexities, etc.
Go ahead, Kirsten.
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to that. So good question. Absolutely. And that was one of our first moves, was to reach out, first of all, to our neighbors in Comox Valley, who were part of the first wave of implementation. And we continue to be in contact with them as recently as today. I had conversation to ask a question. They've been super generous with sharing with us some of their learnings as they've gotten things rolling around referral processes and information sharing, some of those pieces. We've also had meetings with Richmond and Maple Ridge, some of the other larger school districts who've also had multiple teams running. So you can imagine with 4 teams, as I mentioned, that's 28 people altogether. It's really significant. And it's a lot of coordination to bring 4 ministries together, that many people who aren't accustomed to, they each have their own processes and structures and so on. So it's been invaluable speaking with those districts, and I must be honest, it's big and it's new, and I don't think anyone has it completely figured out yet. But as Laura shared, it's been, since we found out that we were receiving the allocation, it's really been seen as an opportunity, starting, you know, with Scott and being able to work with some of those other districts to find out about what can we learn from them, what do we need to avoid, what do we want to make sure that we do, some of those pieces. So yeah.
Thank you. I have a follow-up.
Yes, go ahead, Naomi.
So that kind of, what your last comment actually kind of leads into what I was wondering. You know, just before I actually asked the question, I just wanted to add that, you know, this is like, couldn't come at a better time. And when we were doing our strategic plan and consultation with the public, you know, what's come out from those, the results of those questions that we asked, a lot of it centers around mental health. So this is really a beautiful thing. My concern would be, because you mentioned this, that you have people that are going to be reporting to different agencies, the health authority, MCFD, the school district. I'm just wondering, like, I know that they have the team lead. It looks like they were with, I think, with the health authority. So the complexities of that, like, how is that going to work? When you have union workers that are with QP, and like it's going to be interesting.
It is exactly that, I think, and I probably have less answers for you than I do sort of shared curiosities, and certainly we've taken note of some of those same intricacies. What I will say is we are so fortunate here in Nanaimo Ladysmith to have excellent working relationships with all of our community partners. And so truly coming to that first gathering at Bebin was like a coming together of like-minded individuals, all focused on children and youth in our community, and with a real awareness of some of the existing gaps. And so I would say, you know, the shared focus was very clear, and the shared commitment is very clear in an ongoing way. Those local employer table meetings are very, very, they're very fruitful and very productive, but you're quite right. We can sometimes spend an entire time just talking through things which would be relatively straightforward in one organization, like record storage, or, where does the referral go? How does it go from A to B to C? And we're still working through a lot of those details. So one of the things that's interesting is that the Ministry of Mental Health and Addictions has provided an information platform called Integrate, which is where all of the records are stored, which is shared and accessed by all ICY team members. So I know very little about it so far, to be very honest, because we're just getting rolling, but that is a piece of the model. So
if I could add, we've sort of on a lesser level already in the district have sort of some unique reporting structures. So there could be a situation where an individual, a staff member, might report logistically to say an on-site principal, for their attendance and those pieces, but they might get their guidance on their role and problem solving and case management or what have you from a district staff. So they might kind of have almost like a dual reporting system. And so we have a whole bunch of varieties of things like that exist already in the district. We've also, been strategic on a couple of fronts in that, number one, that we've decided to put all 4 teams housed together in one place. That's not been consistent in the province. And again, that's from Kirsten and Lynn reaching out and connecting with other districts to see what worked, what didn't. So all the teams are together. And then not only are they together, they're located at Dufferin Crescent, where there's other NLPS staff members, including our Assistant Director of Complex Mental Health. And we'll hope that eventually, Kirsten in particular, that will kind of step back a little bit once things are running, and then we'll have a constant conduit to the program and the district. So Lynn will be able to provide that constant communication and conduit so that we can always stay on top of what's happening and understand, things in the program and how it's unfolding.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. The Tanya is next.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good evening, Kirsten and Laura. Kirsten, thank you very much. This is exciting. I was going to ask a question, but I think I'm going to put it out there more as a comment, because in reality, it's not fair to ask it as a question right now. It's more something to think about for the future. What excites me about this is it isn't the same thing, but it reminds me and harkens back to the late 1990s when I was part of something called the Heroin Interagency Team, and but now it was wider and a little different. It had Parks and Rec representation, and it connected more to community schools. And that was actually, don't let me go down this pathway too much, but that was when community schools were really hopping and doing good stuff, and it's something worth looking at again. But anyway, my real comment is, my hope would be that you guys would come back to the board and let us know as this goes on, any policy implications that you see are popping up in ways that we can support the work, and any changes we might need to make to policies, so that this is all, so the board is providing support for the work, and that you have what you need if you do run into those difficulties, because difficulties is probably not a fair word. I know that different ministries, as you say, have different ways of doing things and different values. And I remember some very heated arguments about whose jurisdiction was what, and, and all those sorts of things. So that I see is a way the board can help you, is let us, if there's problems like that, let us be the bad guy and say, no, wait, that's not how it works. It's kind of like the joke of, I'll tell a quick story. I had a friend who was on the phone and he didn't want to go to a party, and he's yelling to his mom, saying really loud, "My mom would never let me do that." So we are happy to do that if you need us to do something in policy that will, because sometimes it's not staff to staff, sometimes it's government to government. and there's a place for both. So let us know how we can support you around this. And I look forward to coming to the open house and learning more.
Thank you.
Thank
Much
you.
appreciated.
Thanks for your support.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Tanya. That was a good point. I see Mark, Trustee Mark said, look forward to when the open house invite comes to visit again. Thank you. Great. I'm not sure he meant again, but yeah, that we're all looking forward to it. And I definitely I would like to go. Does anybody else have any questions? I know I do. I always do, but I don't always do. But I'd like to have other people have some. If they have any thoughts. Well, I'll ask one of my questions, and then hopefully, if people think of it, something pops into their head, please put it in the chat. That you are interested in asking question. So when I first heard about the ICY teams a few years ago, when they were first kind of rolling out with it, I was really excited to hear that, because again, it is access to counseling and stuff like that. We all know is really difficult for families, and doing it in this way sort of helps bridge that gap, right? And it sort of makes it easier, if I may, to access those services, because some folks will be in-house, some folks will be in our schools, right? And sometimes that's the best touch point, the easiest touch point for our students to get access to that, because they trust me. There might be a trust relationship that's happened, and they say, okay, I'd really like to connect you with this team and stuff like that. But what my concern is, again, is the outside ministries, right? And like, we know that there is a complex history with MCFD, especially, and the Ministry of Health, especially with our marginalized populations, who feel unsafe, some rightfully so, interacting with these ministries. It doesn't mean the individual themselves, is the person, but it's that whole systemic fear. And have you heard from the other districts about this? Has it created a barrier in other districts, and how did they? And is this on your radar? Is this something that's being looked at? How to make it easier for that trust relationship to grow within that scope of teamwork that they're going to be interacting with?
I think you're hitting it right on the head in terms of the intentional design of these teams was to place those clinical counselors within school districts as school district employees, which had not been done before. So typically our students rely on having to make a call to Child and Youth Mental Health through MCFD, or through the Y-Star program through Island Health, or through Discovery through Island Health, and so on. And you're quite right, that can be a barrier at times for our families, especially families with negative histories with those ministries. And so the design of the teams is really that these clinicians are employees of school districts. They have lots of contact with school district employees, and ready contact, so they can come right into the school to be able to meet a child and a parent or family, in a comfortable setting in the school, if that trusting relationship is already established there. Or certainly they can interact with school staff to be able to glean that insight around where might be a comfortable spot for this family to be able to make that connection. And I do think that's highly individualized depending on particular children and families and their needs, but this is an effort to try to bridge that gap to some extent. Yeah. I'm very hopeful about that. As you know, our students, as part of our designation process, often have those connections with some of those community partners, and this is a way of just bringing our work closer and closer together with the child at the center.
Thank you for that. It sounds like a much more flexible way of providing the services. And I really love that they included the peer support. That is just makes so much sense, especially the youth and the families peer support worker. Indigenous workers as well will be coming in. That I hope will help create a better relationship and a better trusting relationship to access those very, very needed services. Thank you for the work that you've been doing. I do have one other question, but I was hoping somebody might have another question that we could. Doesn't look like it, so I'm gonna go on with my next question, and it is basically about so. So some of this also has to do with substance use disorder, right? And I see that there is those folks also being brought in, which is absolutely critical, especially now in this day and age, and to get them so much younger and to help them at a much younger stage is really what we're trying to do as a society, right? We have 42.7% of those with substance use disorders have ADHD, actually, as a study done in 2006 by Kessler. So I wonder about the disability aspect, or the neurodevelopmental disabilities that these folks might have, who might not know they have it, and stuff like that. Is this part of sort of a little bit integrated into that as well, like sort of a pre-screening? Is there anything like that happens? I'm super curious how that all works out. And I know, Kirsten, you have like the full background and everything too. But you're one person, and so I wonder how that team is going to bring that along as well.
Yeah, you're hitting on some really important considerations. So the first one, in terms of the substance use, I think this is something that I've been really excited about with our local table. So considering our local needs, you'll be familiar with Discovery, which provides substance use counseling, and many of our older students in their teen years are engaged with Discovery if they have needs around substance use and addictions. And looking at our local needs and some of the need for preventative work, we have decided there are 4 island health positions which are connected to substance use or concurrent disorders, and we have decided to target ages 6 to 12 with those positions. So rather than adding additional supports to the same age range that Discovery serves, we've added a complement to that, so to speak, that's more coming from a preventative angle. So I think that's a really important piece. You also touched upon the developmental disability component, and as you will be aware, the developmental disability mental health team through MCFD is one really precious resource in our community. It's still too scarce a resource for our needs, and I think that's very much a current topic of conversation at the local table. We recognize that as a real need, and wanting to be able to address that in a way that's going to help to serve the needs of neurodiverse children as well. So it's still very much in discussion, I would say. A piece there too, I think that holds a lot of promise, is that the direct linkage with school-based teams is there in a way that it will not have been before between some of these other clinicians and school-based teams. So I'm super hopeful for that potential. At this point in time, stay tuned.
Right.
But
Yeah,
I do want to capitalize sort of on that point, Kirsten, because that's exactly where my mind went with Trustee Morbay's question, in that at least with the students that are K to 12, we are trying to integrate and weave in this ICY into our existing structures and systems. And we will have a whole bunch of information, right, through school-based teams, through our learning services support team, larger referral entity that's already in use now. And so that'll save us a bunch of time. It'll save the children and the youth and their families from telling and retelling their story again, where we can provide so much more supportive information through our already existing and hopefully new and improved systems that we have in place. So, when your comment about the 42% and the ADHD, right, likely we would know that, or there would be some, designation information and on the lookout for, and right, and there can be a holistic, we've known this, this child for 8 years now, you know, from the age of 5, and here's this information, and how can we support and love up this kid as we're getting more appropriate resources and supports in place.
Awesome. Thank you so much for it being on your radar. And I know I know it was, but I just wanted to confirm and let other folks know too. Naomi has a question.
Yeah, one last question, actually, because we're talking about, you know, the information being synthesized so they don't have to repeat it over and over again, et cetera, et cetera. You also mentioned that Lynn Brown will be involved at a district level. But I think what's really important, and I want to ask, is that are these school counselors going to be a part of this information sharing, which I think is really important?
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to that. So absolutely integral, in fact. And so in my work with school counselors, this has been a big topic of conversation, because you can imagine their excitement too around this is super salient for them. And they are very much at the front line of trying to get access to additional supports when we've exhausted our school-based resources and we need to access community-based resources for students. They're at the front line of that. And so this is, even I referenced the designation process earlier. So ICY is really uniquely positioned to be able to be that outside agency support that's a part of students with IEPs even. And so then for school counselors as case managers and as holders of key information about students and with, you know, critical trusting relationships with kids and families, they are right at the center of that. So it gives them access to those clinical counseling colleagues in a way that they have not always had quite as easily before. So.
Yes, thanks very much. That's really good to hear. And yeah, you're right, because when they had to access, speaking from experience, access external agencies, then you didn't really know what was going on in terms of what the plan was for that student, how the student was being supported. So yeah, this is really fabulous. Thank you very much for your very thorough presentation, Laura and Kirsten. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It's exciting. It's really exciting. Sorry, I think I just, no, okay. Close my screen. It's exciting. The more supports we can have that can come in and help students directly is great. It helps our staff. It helps everybody. Helps the community. Helps the families that are directly involved. It brings a more holistic lens on everything. And I thank you so much for all the work. I'm thankful Scott said yes, let's do this. I'm thankful to Laura and Kristen and Lynn. I just have one more question, and that is like, how are you finding the time, Kirsten, to do all of this? All of you? I just
You're gonna make her cry.
is there like is there a secret? Is there a scientific approach? Because I'd really like to know. Like,
Yeah.
please do tell me. I raise my hands to you all because this is integral work that we're doing for our students, and this helps prevent a lot of the huge challenges in our society that we're seeing on a daily basis. And if we can save some lives, I think that's huge, because this will save lives. I really hope for that. So thank you for all your hard work and for all the hard work you're going to be doing in the coming years. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kirsten.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, everyone, I'm gonna bring us now to 8.2, Mark Walsh, Secretary Treasurer, regarding the alternative programming overview. And Mark, before you speak, do you mind if I like get on my little stool here and speak for a moment about this?
You are the chair.
Awesome, thank you. I'd just like to remind folks that as we discuss these alternative programs, that we kind of bring these students, many of whom are on the margins, to the proverbial middle of our conversation that we're going to be having. And I probably should have said this before with our other ICY teams as well, because everybody has a right to equitably access a quality education. And when we speak of these alternative ways of learning, I think personally, we can acknowledge that this is a response to our colonial system that has harmed so many in the past. And the changes that are needed in our systems are taking a little bit longer to happen. And so these students deserve our utmost respect and recognition for how they teach, for how each of them bring such a great thread into our tapestry that is our district. And I also want to acknowledge all the staff that love these kids with all their hearts and who work hard every day to carry them forward to a place where they can feel confident, be safe, be welcome, and ready to take on the world. And I want to thank Mark and Tanya right away off the bat, because I sat down with them and they showed me the system that they use to bring out these numbers, and my brain exploded. And I am so thankful that they brought this forward. I think it's good to take a look at our programs and the budgets and take a look at those every few years. I think it's just a good practice, and I appreciate the hard work that has been put into to give us this information. So off to you, Mark. Thank you.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. And so starting on page 9 of the agenda is a report. It's got my name on it, but that is an oversight because Ms. Sutton, who's with us this evening, thank you, normally doesn't join us for education, worked incredibly hard to put all this information together, as well as communicate with the various leaders of the various programs, who I believe some are here this evening as well. So just want to express appreciation. So I will say right off the bat that the report is a bit of a guidance document that trustees and our partners may want to keep. While the numbers will change year to year, it gives a good kind of overview of how a variety of specialized programming is funded within the district. Another thing to note just at the outset is that this overview, we've kind of picked what the programming would be. So you still may walk into a school, and some questions came up as we were doing this, and say, well, wait a second, what's the Arrow program at NDSS? Isn't there Skills for Life at some of these schools? So this does not include a few things. This is district-based focus. So there will be resources at a school level that may involve specialized programming at the school level to support kids with diverse learning needs, which is a bit of the focus of what we are talking about today. And the other thing to note too is this doesn't include the fact that $14 million flows to CEF, which is not exclusively, but much of it is focused on kids with diverse or learning needs, or stems from designations. And, you know, for instance, so, you know, when we talk about alternative learning, well, theoretically, every kid should be subject to alternative learning because we have class size limits, we have designation limits in class, and we have remedy dollars available to teachers. So you should anticipate individualization essentially across the board, but that's not going to be reflected in really what we're talking about here today. So I think that's an important context to keep in mind. So as you'll clearly see, this is a lot about the budget and about the programs as they're built. I know tonight was meeting 1 of talking about continuous improvement, the goal of continuous improvement in students with complex, unique abilities, Indigenous overall student population, student achievement. The strategy that will be dealt with in February by the Learning Services team will be the enhanced and communicated district-wide multi-tiered model of support. So there's going to be a bit more focus on, I think, the education side of things coming up, and of course we'll be able to answer what questions as we can this evening, or take them away with respect to actually how the kind of outcomes of the investments are going. So you'll see, and again, this is we've kind of sat down and talked about what programs that we wanted to include. So theoretically, we included Learning Alt, Career Tech Center, District Life Skills, Island Connect Ed, and Inclusion Outreach Team, the Tier 3 program. We didn't include, as I noticed, some of those school-based programs that would fund flow from our, ratio that we give to schools, it wouldn't necessarily, it doesn't include the counseling time that would be associated with it. And we also did not include the international student program as an example, which does have some supports that flow with it based off of need for second language skills, but for the most part is a revenue driver and just drives additional blocks within secondary schools, for the most part, some elementary as well. So as you'll see, and again, I much appreciate the input from the various leaders in the district that's supporting these programs to give us a bit of a background on what they are for our back pockets. And then, so for instance, Learning Alternatives is not just Learning Alternatives, it's got a variety of areas within that world. So the Senior Learning Alternatives, and then we've outlined what supports go with them. And they're not necessarily, so when we fund a high school, it's, this many students will lead to a teacher, not quite the same system. And so typically Learning Alt hasn't shifted much year to year because the enrollment has been relatively stable where it's at. They might move within their programs at the school base, but you'll see 84 students in Senior Learning Alt and the folks that go with them. Alternative-based opportunities united by teamwork are about. Again, the numbers are there for you. Intro to Trades is there, and then you'll see the kids that are working with our CUPE partners, refurbing our portables, turning them into learning studios. The Take a Hike program, again, a mixture of external, but mainly internal folks supporting kids with a different way of learning. Flow, not many kids there, but again, some students and talking about how we're funding it. And then Ravenslalem, which doesn't have anyone associated with it at this point. And then finally a breakdown of essentially how much funding those students are bringing in, and then how much the program expenses would be. Now you'll see that doesn't necessarily include all expenses associated with those students. So for instance, the cost of trustees, the cost of me, the cost of our superintendent, the cost of, that kind of centralized administrative services is usually, I think we calculate about 12% or a bit more than that. So this is just us kind of giving a straight revenue versus school expense calculation. You'll see Career Technical Center and the variety of programs associated with that, and I won't go over them except for to say it's a great program that's supporting a number of kids. And you'll see that the revenue expenses largely align with those students as well. District Skills Program, and so this is one of those ones again that maybe causes a bit of confusion in the system. So we have two kind of types of them, and only one is reflected in this report. And so the first one would be, again, that district-based program where we target or we can determine the students that are going to be enrolled in those programs, very high need students, often 1-to-1, if not always 1-to-1 ratio of adult to student. Whereas, and so in those two locations as noted, whereas on a school-based level, at our secondary schools, for instance, Dover and Wellington and Barsby have something similar, but rather than a cohort of kids in a district-based program, we have a number of students that are put together to provide those supports, but then they might be going off to another, general academic course. Some kids working towards, Dogwood rather than Evergreen as an example. And so it's slightly different and funded within the school funding allocation rather than a district choice or a district-based program where we're choosing who's going to be going into the program. So different in that way. And so you'll see again, and it's just to be clear, it's not a negative that the program takes significantly more dollars to support than it brings in from a revenue perspective, because we're supporting high needs kids to hopefully, give them the best life opportunities. And so that's an example of supporting students on Island Connect Ed, and it's going to give you our rundown here with respect to what that looks like. Not keeping in mind, many kids are crossing cross-enrolled. And again, I appreciate the work that Ms. Sutton has done in really digging into a lot of numbers to get this information. So we're hoping that these numbers will be a good guidance document, even with inflation, to present if the same question gets asked in a couple of years. And then finally, the inclusion outreach team in the Tier 3 program. And so you'll see there's not really going to be revenue associated with those students, given where they're going to be enrolled. So it's hard to kind of gauge the revenue versus expense allocation. So we look at it a bit like an expense allocation to support those students. And as noted, the strategy that will be presented in the February education meeting will talk about the strategy of enhancing and communicating a district-wide multi-tiered model of support. Don't quite know what that looks like yet. I don't know if Laura, you want to jump on and speak to that before I open it for questions, but that's generally a good outline of the various district programs and budgets associated with them.
Great. Thank you very much, Mark.
Sorry, I was just jumping on to say, you know, I'm
Fantastic.
here for questions. Kirsten and I are both here for questions on any of these pieces.
Great. Awesome. Does anybody have questions regarding this? Okay, see, Naomi is first and then Tanya. Take it away, Naomi.
I'm not sure if you're able to answer this, Mark, or maybe Laura could or whatever, but I was noticing when I went through I'm sorry, I gotta find it again. Wait a second. The inclusion outreach team, I noticed they have 3 coordinators. And I'm just wondering if that could be elaborated on why. I think there's 108 students, or I had 2 questions on that actually. One of them was why the need, just wondering about having 3 coordinators. And the second piece to that is how much have we increased in our student enrollment in that program since it began?
Okay, and I'll invite anyone else that wants to jump on to comment. So just to provide a little bit more clarification, the inclusion outreach team is part and parcel, or the classroom, if you will, that elementary classroom is part and parcel of this larger inclusion outreach team. So I want to be clear about that. So the 3 coordinators that you see and that you're referring to, one of them is an occupational therapist. The other 2 have inclusion support teacher as their background. And of course, we have the district vice principal has a counseling background. They provide services to the entire school district and support all schools and all school-based teams. So they are not there providing support solely to this classroom. That just happens to, the classroom was a later addition. This inclusion outreach team has been in existence for quite some time in our district in a fairly similar iteration. Like it's stayed pretty steady because it's just so darn useful and helpful to schools out there. So I just want to be really clear about that distinction. And then I've already forgotten your second question.
Yeah, thank you for that, for clarifying that, Laura. That, you know, changes things a lot.
Yeah.
So my second question was around enrollment.
Great.
Okay, so we started, because I remember voting on this program a while back, a couple of years ago, I think. And I think at that time, the figure we were given was between 30 to 40 students.
So the thing that you're referring to that you voted on a couple of years ago was specifically this classroom, this elementary classroom.
Right.
Okay, so
Okay.
yeah, okay. And so the inclusion support team has hundreds of referrals every year. Sometimes they hit that number, a couple hundred even by the winter break. And
Right.
so there's a distinction again. Yeah.
Okay.
And so that number of, you know, say 30 or 40 would be the number of students who have come in and out of the inclusion support outreach team, that classroom that's located at Dufferin.
Right.
Not
Okay.
all at one time, of course, that's a small number at one time, but the goal of that program, of course, is to support children, their families, the classroom teacher, and to have that child transition back to their home school as soon as possible.
Okay.
And sorry, maybe I could add to that, Chair, if that's okay. And invariably, these students would be, you'll see there's no revenue target because the kids are going to be enrolled at their home schools. And so that's why there's no revenue associated with this program. So it's not a kid enrolling in the outreach. It would be this is one of the avenues of supporting those students. And so if you're at Solaire and all of a sudden you're getting supports there, you're not enrolled. It's not a school. It's a program. And so you'd still have a seat in your classroom at Solaire, as an example.
Okay, I appreciate the clarification. And maybe in the reporter, and I was trying to look through it again, is that maybe we could distinguish that the classroom piece, from the overall program.
Okay.
Yeah.
And yes, sir, and maybe I can add too, is so the board 2 years ago added $250,000 to the overall pot, and you'll see the pot 759. So inflation, it would have been well above 400 for inclusion outreach. It was just the specialized aspect of it that was the additional dollars that were added 2 years ago.
Okay. Thank you very much, guys.
You bet.
Thank you. Tanya.
Thank you. Just a quick question going back to the whole issue of Skills for Life in high schools, like the NDSS program versus, I know they've got things apart. Just what is the difference in how students are referred to the district program versus being in a school-based program for Skills for Life?
If I may, Chair, I don't mind addressing that, and feel free to jump into others. So it's a common misconception, and it's probably the words that we use to name the opportunities for kids. So the district life skills programming that's offered at NDSS and at Georgia, students are referred to those supports through a district process. So that would be, students may come from all different catchment areas across the district to attend those programs. In contrast, the Skills for Life opportunities that are offered in our high schools, which historically were more standalone in nature. So students may have been spending more of their school day and in some cases, perhaps even entire school days in a Skills for Life classroom setting. Now, increasingly, students may be enrolled in 1 or 2 blocks of functional academic programming in a Skills for Life classroom setting. And those would be for students who are working on substantially modified academic programs, perhaps, the nature of their work looks substantially different than that of their peers, and it may be a better way to meet their needs in that setting. But they're participating in electives with their peers. They're, all throughout the school building and not spending their full day in a Skills for Life classroom. Does that make sense? The district skills settings, I think, again, I would invite you setting foot in those classrooms and visiting with those exceptionally skilled teachers and EAs that staff those programs is really the very best way to illustrate the important work that they do, because they support students with real complexities, often medical complexities and medical fragility, mobility, often feeding, toileting, a whole number of complexities. So those physical spaces in those rooms include complex equipment that's recommended and monitored by occupational therapists, for example. There are hospital beds, for example, in our district skills program at NDSS, because that's part of the medical care that's required. So those are just to give you an example. At Georgia, we have a complex play space with adapted swings and other equipment that's designed to be able to meet the needs of students in the district life skills setting. So that helps hopefully to paint a bit of a picture of the difference.
Absolutely. Follow up, if I may, Chair. Just So does it follow that if a child is at Georgia, that they will automatically then, when they're done at Georgia, they will stay in that program and go to NDSS, or are there situations where children might go back into a more, I don't know, integrated kind of program?
Absolutely, and that's a very good question. So with all of our supports, we see them as the right supports for a student right now, but we have individualized plans that are aimed at skill development, and so we do see students that will make different transitions into different kinds of programming. So, for example, a student who completes some of their elementary years in the District Life Skills program at Georgia Avenue, for example, may develop skills for independence that allow them to be able to participate in electives in a high school setting more independently than they were able to when they're younger. And you can imagine some of the complex needs. It's around things like using augmentative communication devices and just even learning how to use some of their mobility equipment and some of those pieces that allow them to be increasingly independent.
Absolutely. I'm trying to be careful because I do know a couple of children in that Georgia program and I don't want to say anything inappropriate. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Chair, if I may add. I'm just going to take this opportunity with this question and Kirsten's response just to highlight and kind of just remind folks, because it's come up in all three aspects of the presentations this evening, is that we have this district learning services support team, which has at any time could have a variety of Department of Learning Services folks on that team. And it's through that LSST that students, schools can refer, or students can be referred to some of these programs, right? So when we're thinking about the District Life Skills program or the Inclusion Outreach program and our, hopefully soon to be our ICY teams, we are trying to build on having a consistent, referral process or equitable access process, consistent process that we can provide so that we can, the LSST is a bit of a think tank. It's a brainstorming, it's a support system for principals and school-based teams. So they've done everything under the sun that they can figure out, and they're turning over every last rock under the moss and trying to provide the best supports they can for these students and their families. And they need a little bit more support and conversation. So sometimes those referrals conversations can be conversations. Sometimes they can be brainstorming sessions. Sometimes they may end up in a referral. So it's, again, we're trying to build this consistency so that we can provide, really good access and fulsome referral processes to a number of these district programs.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Trustee Mark. Oh, sorry, can't hear you, Mark. Oh no.
Sorry, microphone. Happy New Year, everybody. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Mark, for the presentation. We asked for it, so we got it. I have a bit of a difficult question, and I'll just go out and ask it. On page 9 of the report at the bottom there, it mentions that we have our funding is centralized and then we disperse afterwards. I'm wondering, based on international education earns us quite a bit of revenue. When we disperse the money out, do we end up with winners and losers in that? Who are our winners and losers in that?
We do, absolutely. So if you are, I can tell you this, if you are a small elementary school, you are a winner. If you are a large elementary school, you are a loser. And so they typically tend to align with socioeconomic. So for instance, Frank May is probably a net benefit to the school district from a financial perspective, whereas Gabriola or you know, QQS or Chase or Solaire would be because their base kind of costs are higher and they have less kids to pay for the principal, etc. And the same would apply in a secondary context, of course, as well. And so, you know, Dover as an example, and it's great with the international students. They have the largest population of international students, and you know, they're going to be getting less less dollars per student than a Barsby would because of that overhead. Yeah, I wouldn't call them winners and losers, but there's certainly there's schools that subsidize other schools on that basis. I mean, the way the funding model works is the bigger the school and the less complexity you have, the kind of less money per student that you get versus the opposite.
Right. Thanks. Follow up, if I may, Chair. Thanks. Are there any programs, not just school by school basis, but programs that might come out winners? Let's say the coal mining education department, we probably wouldn't fund that as much as, say, you know, basketball. I don't know.
Sure. Well, you'll see from the budgeted numbers that we've presented that this year, as an example, is ICE, the Island Connect Ed, is a net contributor. In previous years, it's been a net. It's the last couple actually. It's not been, and so that's a change. Most of the time, programs are relatively break even, but it's going to swing a little bit back and forth depending on the enrollment.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Mark and Laura. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Trustee Greg.
Turn my camera on here. Hopefully, there we go. Thank you, Chantal, through you to staff. I'm just curious with respect to our trades programs, given that, you know, the construction industry is probably our biggest employer in the region in terms of industry. I'm wondering what the demand is for this program in relation to the enrollment and whether there's opportunities for expanding the program. And if this goes beyond what we've looked at here, I'm okay to come back and maybe ask it another place, because I'm not quite sure if we got into that level, but if there is an answer, I'm wondering if we know that here, and if not, I can find the answer in another way.
Through the chair, if I may, I'm happy to begin to answer that question, and we might need to take this away and gather some more specific information to answer your question, Trustee Keller. Yeah, there is increased interest and increased demand in trades. One of the issues that school districts have across the province is coming into agreement with funding from the Industrial Training Authority. So the ITA and our partners at VIU are where we do often some of our trades and training programs, and they have limited seats. So VIU would, if they had additional funding from the ITA, they would offer an additional cohort of seats. And so we have a Mid-Island consortium of school districts that we all try to put seats in. So we have students that want to go into welding or carpentry and joinery or the electrician program. And there's only so many seats that they have available. So some seats are allocated to Nanaimo Ladysmith Public Schools, some to Cowichan, some to Comox Courtney. And all of the districts could find additional students if there were additional seats. So yes, there is a growing interest and a growing need, and it's a topic of conversation up and down the island on how we can encourage the various partner groups to create more seats and more spaces available in these programs, because there's definitely a need and a growing, and as you mentioned, you know, increased population and the need to build out and construction, the need is there for sure.
Yeah, thank you. If I may just have a follow-up, Chantal. I don't know, Don, if you have an answer to this, or perhaps something we need to take back to our board at a later date, but just thinking ahead, as maybe there's some advocacy work that could be done in this regard to try and encourage the partner groups to find ways to expand the number of seats. I think this is an area where there's tremendous opportunity, and any way that we can find to encourage our students to get into any of the trades is a really good thing, especially in our region. So I just thank you for the information and look forward to seeing maybe what role, if any, the board can play in advocating for this. Thank you.
And perhaps I can just add one thing as well. And Dawn, maybe it's a bit too deep, but you know, we have seen leadership in that area start to reach out to other institutions as well to try to connect us to get you know, their seats somewhere else or opportunities somewhere else in addition to VIU. That's been something that Dave Travers has been working on this year with some success, and so maybe that doesn't mean more net seats for the province, but it certainly means a few more opportunities for our kids. And so I assume that leather on the ground, feet on the ground, boots on the ground will that kind of work will continue to expand opportunities.
Good questions. Thank you. Naomi.
My question centers around the Learning Alternatives programs, the senior, the About, the Flow, the Take a Hike. And I just want to start by saying, before I ask my question, because I'm trying to figure out how I can word this question. But it's one that I've wanted an answer for a while. So I want to start out by saying, I know the staff that works in Learning Alternatives are extremely dedicated, passionate, hardworking, and I know their leader is, I'm a big fan of their leader, actually. But what I wanted to know is, our district promotes the idea of inclusion, and that all students deserve to be able to learn in the same workplace and have those opportunities. I think we call it success for all, right? And I guess, and that's the promotion. We've removed schools that had learning hubs for students who couldn't do all their work in a classroom. They would get a block of time to be able to work on those assignments with a teacher and EAs one-on-one. So we're having them in the classroom. We have teachers' aides that go in and try to support students in the classroom. But we've taken a segment of students and we've moved them to a separate school. And we've created great programs. But my question is, why did we go in this direction? Because I was just thinking, was it financial? Was it based on need and the thought that we could do something different in a separate setting? And my other concern is, like, students that don't have, because of their situation, don't have the ability to get to that school. Don's popped on because I know he's going to answer this for me. I have visited this school and I think it's fantastic, but I do have concerns of moving students out of their community to another environment. So maybe we could talk about that a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And through the chair, I share much of your sentiment, and I think we've had lots of internal conversations in learning services and with Brett at Learning Alt around do we have more students in learning alternative programs than we feel we should have? And that's a question that I share with colleagues around the province, and lots of districts have far higher numbers as a percentage of students in learning alternatives. We have approximately 300 of our students in a district of 1,500, and lots of districts that are maybe half of our size might have 500 or 600 students in alternate settings. So it's always a question. I'll give an example of the Flow program, which is designed to support students who often have severe mental health challenges. And it's a small number of students. Mark shared when he was going through the different programs. There's typically about 12 to 15 students in that program. That's a program that needs a unique setting outside of a regular bricks and mortar setting. Most of those students were referred to and came towards that program because going to a building with 1,000 or 1,500 students just was not possible for them. And so a physical setting that allowed them to engage in their education in a different setting at this moment in time was required. Other students in some of the other programs absolutely may have a story that says, you know what, I think I could have been successful in my neighborhood school if something was in place that wasn't there for me. And that's constantly a conversation with our school leaders and working with Brett's team to say, how can we ensure that students who want to stay in their neighborhood schools can stay in their neighborhood schools, even if they need an alternative experience in that home school. And I think our schools are doing a better job each year of trying to meet that. The pandemic kind of did a bit of an assist with that. A lot of our outreach programs are looking a lot more like a learning alternative setting in our bricks and mortar schools, where students say being there 5 days a week, 5 hours a day isn't going to work for me. And schools are saying we can provide a more of like a senior learning alternative program for you so that you can stay there. And we're also working hard to do transitions where not only do students transition into learning alternatives, but they find ways to transition back to the bricks and mortar school so that they can graduate with the peers that they grew up with in the neighborhood. But it's a great question to ask, and I hope you keep asking that question frequently, because we do need to be mindful for each and every student who registers at Learning Alternatives. Is that the right place? And is that the best place for them to graduate from?
Follow up. So we used to have I wouldn't say it's a solution, but we had a place for students that didn't fit in, whether it was behaviorally, emotionally, and it was never usually around learning ability. It was usually around behavior, emotion, attendance, those sort of things. And that was junior and senior alt in the high school system. And, I witnessed what I would call the success of those programs in the school. Students still got to be in their community and yet learn at a pace and in an environment that made them feel safe. And I guess for me, I just, I think sometimes we make change because we think we have better ways of doing things. And I'm not saying that what's happening isn't a good thing where it's at, but I have a real strong belief in the community school. And so, yeah, just food for thought more than anything. Because I applaud the staff that work in Learning Alternatives. I think they're doing an incredible job. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And if I may say, there are many students who are engaging in programs at their neighborhood school that it looks a lot like an alternative school programming for them. So they might attend one elective and do all of their academics with a single teacher who's supporting them in that hub environment that you spoke of. So they not every student in a high school has a semester schedule with 8 courses in a year with their peers. So there's a lot of hybrid models for students and a lot of teachers in our neighborhood schools delivering things in a supportive and alternative way.
Yeah, I think the difference is though is there would be a junior and a senior. There'd be 2 classrooms that students could go to. Now schools have one outreach program, and so that teacher can only have X amount of students. So I think that's what I was referring to. But thank you, Dawn, very much.
Through the chair, if I may add as well. I just wanted to, thank Trustee Bailey actually for voicing this topic. And I'll just add, and thank you so much, Dawn, for being here and for popping on screen. I appreciate that I share your curiosities, I guess, if I will. And, I want to acknowledge that we exist in Canadian society, which has a long history of colonialism. And if we look around at whether it be education or health or social services, there are a lot of systems and structures that have a colonial history. And right down to our everyday workings here in the school district, the Ministry of Education and Childcare have very specific structures and systems in place, and it can present challenges to our end goal. So I think we all share, and with your leadership, you're providing us with our North Star. We understand, through your strategic plan, what our North Star is. And we too agree, and we're on board, and we want to move in that direction and get there. So what I see right now, when we look at whether, as Dawn refers to, bricks and mortar or traditional or, regular school-based supports and our tier 3 support. So Learning Alternatives is a tier 3 support as a scaffold until we can get to that place where that sort of flexibility in programming and learning and being in community can be reached. We're not there yet. We understand that we want to get there. We are putting pieces in place every day, as I hope you understand and know, every day to try to get us there. But I'm sort of seeing the structures and systems we have now are very best scaffold to get us where we want to go.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for that. That was really a great conversation, discussion about this. Leanna is next up.
Hi. I loved that question, Naomi. Thank you. I got a big juicy answer from everybody. That was great. My question's hopefully really easy. It's about the trades trailer, and it goes to 9 elementary schools. I was just wondering if it's like always the same 9 or if everyone gets a turn and it's switched up.
Through the chair, now you're asking really tricky questions. So I don't want to speak on behalf of Dave Travers, who's running that program, but I believe they have a 3-year rotation where they do have the trades trailer that's going to go to 9 schools this year, 9 schools the following year, 9 schools the following year, hit all of our elementary schools. And then in each of the other 2 years, they have a plan in place. And I can't speak to great detail of that, but I do remember, Dave, they do have a plan for that. So yeah, they used to try to hit all of the schools at a kind of a shallow level, and now they're trying to go a little bit deeper. And I know that the schools that have had it so far, the classes have really are loving that experience. It's a great introduction to that, to you know, pulling some wire and picking up a hammer, and it really, the kids love the hands-on piece to it.
Okay, thank you.
Leanna, I have one of those elementary trades trailer boxes as a gift from my son, and it's with a lid that he's made, and it says Mom, but he put the lid on up, built it upside down, so it actually says wow.
That's amazing. Awesome. Thank
Even
you.
better. Thank you, Don. And I do think that is what I remember as well when I was talking to Dave earlier this year, when he first started out and he was trying to wrap his head around everything. That's fantastic. Thank you, Leanna. I've heard really great things about that trades trailer, by the way, as well, from folks. Tom, you're next.
Happy New Year. Nice to see everybody. Welcome back. Hopefully this the restart is going smooth enough. I want to kind of come back to the idea about the philosophy behind centralizing our alternative services. And for me, one of the systemic benefits that I would hope to see from such a decision would be that these sites would become incubators of best practices, that we would bring together staff that have the best of intentions, but not with the spirit of trying to keep them there, that we'd be devolving out best practices to school sites. And to me, that's the purpose of these. If they become an end of themselves, I worry about the direction that we're going and if we'll ever return back to something that I recognize as inclusive practice in community schools. So maybe you could keep us abreast or maybe even fill us in about what are some of those practices that we've been able to develop and put back into schools so that kids stay more comfortable in their community school. And thanks for taking on these tough philosophical questions. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Trustee Rokeby, and I won't go on at length. I will simply say that one of our big drivers that I think aligns with the comment you made is when we look at students at learning alternatives, the question is this the only place in the entire district where that student could have that learning experience? And if the answer is yes, then learning alternatives is the right program for them. If the answer is no, then we need to grow those learning experiences in that neighborhood school. So, you know, an example of the Take a Hike program, which has a clinician attached to that program is unique. And if you're in Take a Hike program and that's the right place for you, we can't deliver that anywhere else in the district. But there are some opportunities that are happening in the About program that some of those teachers are working some magic that we could duplicate in some of our bricks and mortar experiences. And those staff are willing to work alongside and make those experiences happen. So, yeah, that's the question that Brett and I often wrestle over is this the only place? Because if it is, great. If not, then we need to grow those experiences across the district.
And Dawn, at the secondary level, and Trustee Rokeby, we've just been talking about with the new reporting order, for example, dealing with some specific aspects that have been quite challenging, I think, to get a handle on. And Learning Alternatives has opened their doors to host sort of a district-wide conglomeration of trying to problem solve through how to best serve kids who aren't completing their coursework, because in Learning Alternatives, we've got a bunch of strategies and have seen lots of successes in how they're supporting what's now called, what's the IE stand for, Don?
Insufficient evidence.
Right. Yeah, it's a new sort of label in the reporting order. And so we're looking to, Learning Alternatives and how they've been able to support coursework like that. It's quite complex. And I'm going to take the opportunity once again to mention the Learning Services referral process, or centralized referral process. That is the team in place alongside our inclusion outreach team, where it's a bit of a hub. So they're connected to every single school. They're connected to every single school-based team, and those practices, that's exactly what's happening, is those practices and what's working and what's not, what's next. It's sort of this centralized hub of ideas, like a think tank, and those are then received and then shared back out again from either the team and out, or from a school into the team and back out to other schools. So I know I've talked a lot about that team, but it's invaluable.
Follow up, if I might, Chair. Yeah, thank you for those answers, Don and Laura. One of my schools in my zone, and one that's close to my heart, is Georgia Avenue, and it has a program that has been really successful at keeping kids that might end up in these programs in the school. And it's a pull-out model, and it has a fancy acronym because everything in education has to, but I'd forget it right now. But I hear from staff that, a couple of years later, the idea that we're able to support these kids in situ, where they want to be with their families, with their, those are the kind of creative tools that I really want to see flow out of these programs. I don't know whether this program came out of a district initiative or whether it's a local develop. I wouldn't want to steal George's thunder, but it seems to be working for a lot of kids. So I don't know if I don't know if we're asking people to walk and chew gum. I don't know if it's a matter of whether, centralized or decentralized. Can you do both? And what kind of culture do you create if you go too far in one direction or the other?
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you very much for taking my questions. I noticed Miss Robinson jumped up. I always want to hear from you. So if you had anything to say, please do.
If I may, Chair, I just wanted to note, I think what you're referring to is the Funk group at George Avenue.
Oh, you're right. You're right. I thought for a second maybe it was yours.
Yeah, I wish I could take credit for it, but it doesn't end with a K, it ends with a C, which is short for functional skills group. And so that is the work of our inclusion outreach team, which is beginning to take legs and spread throughout our district. And we're seeing tremendous success with the Funk groups across our elementary settings. And it's achieving exactly what you described. It's super exciting to see very much what you're talking about. I liked your term incubator, thinking about Learning Alternatives and considering that an incubator for best practices that can apply in all of our settings. And the Funk group is an example at the elementary level of that. So
yeah, that was the name. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's because at the basis of it, I'm just concerned that access, right? I know that there are kids in our neighborhood that getting to and from Dufferin every day, getting to and from Woodlands every day is as much an impediment as it is an opportunity. So we just have to always be keeping those kids in mind. And thank you very much. It sounds like you are, and keep up the good work.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you, staff. These are not easy discussions. They're not, how many wheels are on that car situation. These are these lovely humans who are at the center of what we do, and these amazing humans who are trying to do the best for our students in our district. And I really appreciate the answers that we've been receiving, and I appreciate your willingness to engage and help us understand that better. I really appreciate it a lot. I don't see any more questions in the chat right now, so I'll take an opportunity to ask my own question. Some of you all stole my questions, so which is great. That's fine. Because these are not, as Mark said, like a regular high school where there's ratios. There's, you know, kind of like a budgetary sort of like template almost. Probably not exactly like that. I mean, Tanya would probably love that, but it's different, right? The budgets are created differently. So how do these programs, like the CTC program, like Learning Alternatives, go about like asking for more money or asking for more funding? Is there I guess the curiosity is because, you know, we sort of like approve the budget sort of thing. Will this ever come to us and say, you know, hey, the school would like to increase their budget sort of thing? How does that look in the practical sense? And yeah, are they getting enough? I mean, we're taking from one to another, and I don't want to do that or anything like that, but how would that come to us in any way?
Sure. So I can start a little bit. It's a little bit about enrollment to be clear. So in the context of Island Connect Ed, in the context of Learning Alt as well, it is going to be somewhat enrollment driven. It's just not a kind of, you know, 25 kids, here's a teacher. That's just not the way that it is. So we will look at enrollment to determine. Of course, Learning Alt is typically err on the side of more generous staffing, and so typically we don't miss a need to add, although in previous years I think that we have. So that's that aspect, and Dawn and Laura may want to talk more about it too. Then of course, learning services often will see a need and have some flexibility in certain aspects of their budget, particularly when it comes to inclusion, that may indicate more support is going to flow one way or another. And I think when you hear about Kirsten, some of her responses, and hear Laura talk, you know, I always talk about, remember that people are money in our system, and so changing what people are doing in a day is actually changing the money, even though you're not changing the people or the budget. And so learning services will often say, okay, here's a focus shift that's going to occur, and that more supports are going to flow that way. Maybe I can turn it to Dawn or Laura to talk about exactly how the kind of ask goes. But that's the general answer, and maybe Tanya will want to come on and help out too.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I think you kind of explained that fairly well. In a perfect world, all of our students would start in September for the 1701 capture in the program that best meets their needs, whether that's at their neighborhood school or at Island Connect Ed or CTC or Learning Alternatives. Occasionally that's not the case, so a student might, you know, their funding might start at their neighborhood school, and then by November we realize, oh, you know what, they're not attending, and referral to Learning Alternatives might be the right place to go. Well, we don't, Learning Alternatives doesn't get extra funding for that student, but we make sure that they have a space in that program to get supported. Likewise with Island Connect Ed, occasionally students will start off, you know, the bricks and mortar, and then realize I'm doing one course through Island Connect Ed, that's a better fit for me. Our CTC funding typically falls to the students, so they do a lot of their registration this time of year for next year. So students who are going into a CTC program that starts in September will already be starting to enroll in that. So the funding will go to CTC for that. Because a lot of their programs are capped, we know exactly how many seats we have. So if there's, you know, 20 students seats in an electrical program, we get 20 in there. We know the funding is going to go to CTC for that program. So it's not as I make it sound like it's clean and easy, and Tanya will be pulling her hair out if she actually showed you how complicated and messy the funding falls around the district. But at the end of the day, when a student needs a program, we get them into a program, and the funding always figures itself out. That's one of the pieces I think Mark referred to, that there's some centralized pieces that allow us to support programs that meet kids' needs, and it's not the same across the district, but it's definitely equitable in the sense that students get what they need. but I'll let Tanya or Laura go into more detail.
Yes, Chair, good evening, everyone. Chair, if I could add, there are also situations where the district receives additional grants such as CTC, where on page 16 of 25, the health dual credit grant came in this last year, and the early childhood educator grant came in the year before. And in that opportunity for additional staffing to support these initiatives comes forward. It's not necessarily something that's carried on, and that's an important aspect of it that sometimes makes complex staffing situations, because it's not always ongoing funding. It's something ministry rolls out to say, we see some need to bring students into trades. Trustee Keller was speaking of that earlier, and ministry has identified some areas of which, you know, healthcare, there's gaps out there. We're all aware of that. So creating programming and funding opportunity for the district to utilize and create a program. But once the program gets going and the kinks, so to speak, are ironed out, that funding will fall off, and a different way of capturing the students and providing tuition for the students will come into play, and that funding for the individual teacher, FTE, or whatever that might look like, may not carry forward. So it's just another layer that could be opportunity certain years. So I'll leave it at that.
And I'll augment, Tanya and Don, if you can stay on, I'll just augment that a bit if I may, Chair. Through the chair, is the term loose and tight coupling comes to mind here. So we've got you know, funding that comes in that is required, and it provides sort of a base funding, if you will. And then if there's anything over and above, and we're looking at school-based staffing, for example, if there's anything over and above, it's usually quite small, but we do try to then differentiate the support, and there's a variety of ways that we do that depending on the kinds of staffing or support that we're looking at. Everything from almost like a school review that our team, members of our team, will work through with every school as they're identifying their needs and their priorities. You know, whether it's EA staffing or, you know, inclusion support, teacher staffing, and those pieces, we do try to differentiate that as much as we can, and that's kind of the loose versus the tight, and that's really closely connected to all of the pieces that Tanya does, and we work very closely with finance. It gets quite sticky. There's not a whole bunch of extra money left over for us to be able to allocate, and then a small portion then, you know, maybe is available at the district level, and that's where you'll see, as Mark was referring to, you know, learning services via all of the staff in the field, you know, primarily principals, vice principals, will pick up on the themes and the needs that are out there, whether it be, you know, ELL and, you know, a large number of families with refugee experience, or, you know, we've got special purpose funds, right? We've got the Indigenous education budget. So those pieces are layered over, and we can look at and notice trends and needs that are out there, and learning services will do our best to shift some of those pieces to respond to those needs.
Sounds also too that we may need to do a little advocacy and say, hey, if you're gonna, you know, fund us $50,000 for this health dual credit grant, perhaps that need to just not be a one-time thing. It needs to be a continuous thing. If you want these students to be there, you need to actually pay for it on a longer term basis. Don't really understand that whole concept. Here's some money, and we're not going to like add to that next year, but you know, try to do what you can. Yeah. Hard to stretch 50 grand for, you know, 5 years or whatever, to get students enrolled on a continuous basis. I really appreciate these reports. There is a lot to dig into here, and I really, like I said earlier, Tanya and Mark sat down with me and showed me, and it was scary. Tanya, like, super props. How all of that works in the accounting world. And like I'm pretty proud of our programs here. Like the CTC program, I wish more people knew about it. It looks like one of our programs isn't full, and they have room for, you know, 75, but they only have how many here? I can't remember which one it is now. Is it to train and trades? No, I can't remember. Work in trades, right? Like we talked about, advocacy work that needs to maybe happen on our end to make sure that we can get those seats filled and get our students in there because it's helped a lot of students that I know graduate and work and do something that they are passionate about too. So that's always good. I really appreciate all of this. Again, I know I've said that like 3 times now, and I don't have any more questions myself. I think a lot of it has been answered. And if there's other questions, I think they're more education outcome related sort of thing. And I think that's more of a different conversation to have. But I learned a heck of a lot. And the funk group actually sounds like such a great, it's a great name. I don't like acronyms, but you know, that one's not so bad. Thank you again, all of you, for your hard work and everyone on this call. I believe we're coming to the end now. We're at 9. Correspondence referred from the regular board meeting. We don't have anything. 10, there is no unfinished business. And 11, there's no new business. Question period. Are there any questions from? Nope. Okay. Karen has told me no questions. So I believe we are now moving on to adjournment. I appreciate you all for coming here tonight and spending your time with us. And I see that Mark has put in a motion to adjourn, seconded by Tom. Anybody opposed? Anybody at all? I don't think anyone is. So I will call this meeting adjourned. And thank you everyone tonight for coming. Happy New Year. I hope this 2024 is fantastic for everybody. Thank you.